So my name's Paul. I am on the local volunteer committee of Charity Institute here in Northern Ireland. It's a big day for me. My daughter turned 14 and I took over the chair role just this morning. So a bit scary, a bit big boy, so I'll need to make sure I'm up to that.
Congratulations, Paul, that's great news.
Much. Thank you. Hope we're doing the right thing. And one of the things that we are trying to do is get as much support as we possibly can to fundraisers right across Northern Ireland, but not just across Northern Ireland. I work for a national charity. I'm based in Northern Ireland. I support fundraising in Scotland, in Wales, in the north of England, in the Midlands. And I know that many of you will be not based here, but support fundraising here. And those of you who have nothing to do with Northern Ireland, welcome anyway. Really good to have you here. One of the great things about this is that today, this programme of support that we have in between now and the end of May, we're very kindly funded by the National Lotteries Awards for All. And so we want to make sure that everybody gets to avail of it if possible, and hey, webinars, get as many people on there as possible. Do check out, I'll put a link in the chat a little bit later. We've got a number of events, like I say, between now and the end of May. I'll put a link on, have a look, see if any of those other topics float your boat as well. And so because we've got that lottery support, means that we can put this on for free to members and as good as free, as close as we could get for non-members. So it's £5 nominal charge for guests, and that's for all of the webinars as well. And we've got some more big names as well on that list, which I'll share. So today, as of last night when I looked, we had, I think, 30 members, 11 guests signed up. We've had a couple more since, so thank you for bearing with me trying to send out links. And those of you who aren't members, consider it. I'll put a link again in the chat to membership and a discount code as well in the chat today. So before I hand over to Elley, just a quick moment to say thanks as well for signing up to what perhaps looked a bit wordy, safeguarding declaration. Really appreciate you doing so. We don't really need reminding at all, but we are all here to support each other. So, please be kind, be respectful. Don't be driving the car down the road while you're sitting in this. Be sensible and be open, and please do squeeze everything you possibly can out of Elley today. So that's all I wanted to say, but a big thank you, and I hope you get what you need from today. Hand over to you, Elley.
Thank you so much, Paul. Okay, well, first and foremost, obviously, a huge thank you to the Chartered Institute of Fundraising Northern Ireland. Try saying that after a few, for hosting. We are massively grateful to be able to have this session and be part of the fantastic series that you have lined up. We're really, really grateful to be able to link in with members, associates, fundraisers, charities, all across everywhere from what I can tell. I also just wanted to single out a few of the CIOF-NI members who have been really helpful. Callum, Paul and Claire, you've been fantastic to work with, so thank you. Thank you, of course, to everybody attending. We understand you've got hectic schedules, you're taking time out. I am utterly confused as to how we have got to March already. I'm sure some of you are the same, but hopefully you'll get some useful info out of this. Just having a quick scan over the attendee list, I can see there's quite a mix in terms of cause and size and scale, and what I can only assume individual giving experience. So bear with us. We're trying to sort of reach out to a broad spectrum. And again, just to emphasize, our focus today is on Northern Ireland, specifically, in that the couple of examples that I have decided to showcase are Northern Ireland based charities. But again, hopefully the principles and techniques and so on will apply across every organisation. Apologies today, we had, I think, Ash Gilbert, RMD, to attend. Unfortunately, per Ash, it's very, very poorly. So we have the wonderful Amy joining us, which is fantastic. In terms of questions and queries, I'm just going to ask you if you can bear them in mind and hold them until the end, and then we'll do a quick session. If you have anything, you can type it in the chat and Amy will pick it up. Again, you'll have noticed that we are recording this session. The purpose is so that other people can see it for themselves in future, or of course you can watch it again if you feel so inclined. If you need any information on our data privacy statement, you can email us at dataprotection@pebblebeachfundraising.com. So yes, sorry, just to make sure that I have flashed the next slide up. Oh, excuse me 1 second. Next. Okay, so that's our privacy information. Obviously, please don't spend the time reading it now, but have a good news later on if needs be. Okay, so when it came to thinking about this session, I was racking my brain as to what I think will be useful and what the objectives need to be. So really, I think it's sort of, I'll show you the structure as to how it's going to unfold, but essentially what I wanted to do today was to help all of the attendees with just a little bit more information around donor perceptions, what's been happening, especially in the situation of the pandemic, obviously, and then to think about individual giving trends. Now, these very much focus on Northern Ireland, so bear with me on that, but I'm sure a lot of them are mirrored across all of the UK and Republic of Ireland too. And then the second element was to be able to demonstrate to you how individual giving can really be at the heart of your recovery and what you can start thinking about doing that's going to ultimately improve results and hopefully drive down costs as well to some degree. So I'm extremely passionate about individual giving. I have been for a long time. And I really do assert that it is, to me, it's at the heart, absolute heart of recovery and resilience. I just think, it's amazing, full stop. But we're able to reach such a broad audience all at the same time, and it can be absolutely transformative. So, as I say, I'm going to showcase some recent examples of sort of Pebblebeach North. So this is the Pebblebeach North tends to deal with Northern Ireland, Scotland, Republic of Ireland, and how our clients have been really optimising communication through individual giving specifically. So, structure. We're going to have a really quick peek. So I will not labour this, but I want to give you some information about the macro environment. So this is UK wide. This is what's been going on the last 2 years. Then we're going to dive down, have a look at recent key trends in Northern Ireland individual giving, with thanks to NICFA for doing their fabulous individual giving survey that they do every year. Then we're going to showcase the local charities. So there's 2 I have selected. And then over to you, as I said, Q&A, feedback, whatever you want, discussion, whatever, we'll be very happy. And there's also some information about next webinar that Pebblebeach are putting on and how you can get in touch with us should you feel that way inclined. Okay, so this is such a cliche. I mean, it's such an obvious thing to say that the pandemic brought about unprecedented times. And it's absolutely impossible to fully appreciate how complex the impact has been on the charity sector, but there's a few broad things to think about. What's indisputable is obviously economic uncertainty inflicted by the pandemic. It led to 2 things: a drop in income, obviously, for charities, and also then a bit of a double whammy, an increased resilience on an increased reliance on the public that the public had on charities and the state as well. So it's had an impact on charities on a multitude of levels. So whether that's income across all sources, whether it's volunteering, whether it's service delivery, working practices, the whole range. So what's interesting is to try and understand some of the sort of donor perceptions that were taking place during the pandemic and the impact that's had on people's behaviour. So there's a really nice bit of research that they're NFP research now rather than NFP synergy, but they did a few different surveys in relation to the pandemic and what its impact was. I think one of the most interesting things is the impact on trust. So where other organisations saw like a significant bump in public trust, especially with the first lockdown, charities didn't have that. Charities were consistently at about 60%, and I'll show you a wee graph to show the pattern, but the public were consistently agreeing that they trust in charities to that level. But what's interesting when you think about who we're benchmarking against, so this is like the Royal Mail, small businesses, supermarkets, so they're all way ahead of us in the ranking. And you know, even the government enjoyed a bit of a bump back in March 21 whenever they had the vaccination rollout. So question is, why did charities, the trust that people had in charities, stay static? Well, I think the findings from NFP research was that the charity sector essentially remained unseen during the pandemic. There was a survey done in spring 21 where 55% of the general public were unable to identify a single charity that were working in COVID response. So it's a bit of an indictment. You know, I think essentially we weren't visible enough. We weren't out there. People didn't see what we were doing. And then this led on to, I would say, the public's concern in charities. Essentially, we started coming really, really low down the pecking order, which I think is terrifying. Again, when you look at some of our bedfellows in this research, we had small businesses coming out top. This is what people were concerned about, 68%, pubs and restaurants, 62%, hotels, 59%, and charities right down there at 53%. Okay, well, I mean, it's pretty stark, but you can see why these behaviours then start, or these attitudes then start impacting on donor behaviour. So again, this slide just gives you a demonstration of those patterns of how trust stayed static and concern. Well, really, we were well down against some organisations that I think we'd be quite shocked at. So what about drilling down then to Northern Ireland specifically and looking at individual giving? So again, this is looking at the individual giving survey from 2001 or 2021, sorry. So essentially, NICFO go out and they do these surveys, as I said, every year. And essentially they make sure that it's fully representative data set. It's from, I think it's about 1,000 is the sample. You've got a 16 plus population, and then it's representative in terms of age, sex, socioeconomic group, and so on, and geographical location. So some of the key findings that came out of this. So essentially, during the past 12 months, respondents indicated that they had given a significant amount less to charity. Essentially, it was 20% less. It was £136 down from £169. So of course there's variation within that, looking at, you know, males or the more elderly who gave much more significant amounts. The next key observation is that essentially 27% of respondents decreased their charitable giving since the beginning of pandemic, and a few different reasons. Obviously there are things like job losses, income loss. What's really interesting is a quarter of them wanted to support local business instead of their charities, which is just to be mind-blowing. Fewer opportunities maybe due to COVID, and there was 9% that felt that charities were already well supported. You know, we didn't need to bother. So it's looking pretty bleak, and I'm really sorry to have to say it, but essentially the situation is staying. Most of the respondents, I think it was 3/4, that's right, 3/4 of the respondents indicated that they expected their charitable giving to stay the same. So there was only 16% expected it to increase. So as I say, pretty bleak, pretty tough. And one of the really significant situations in terms of giving was there was a real seismic shift, obviously, with digital giving, which is, you know, everybody can understand that and appreciate that. But whilst there was an exponential growth in digital giving, the way that people were giving changed massively, especially with regards to direct debit. So direct debit donors reduced by almost 35%, again, which is terrifying. What's super interesting is things like Facebook. It was a threefold increase with Facebook activity. Charity websites, also they increased by 17% as well. So that's just on 1 year. So we've got some really interesting activity going on. We've got some really big changes happening. So I suppose the question to ask is, what impact did this have then on Northern Ireland charities? And the evidence that comes through is pretty stark. So again, this is coming from a piece of work that NICFA did regarding the impact survey. So again, I think it was a consultation with 200 odd charities. There was one swathe earlier, which was 220, but this one was 200 odd. And these were the findings that came back. So essentially, we're in a situation where almost 70% of organisations indicated they'd lost funding or income. Over 39% of organisations reported that they lost up to a quarter of their income. And then astonishingly, it's really unfortunate, 16% have lost between 76 and 100% of their income. I don't know how any of you feel seeing these figures, if you're seeing them, if this is new information, if you're familiar with what has gone before. But I think when I was having a look at it, I found it rather shocking. Now we know that, I mean, this is obviously the situation for some organisations. I have to say, and this isn't scientific, but I've been fortunate enough to speak to some different organisations through January and February, and it's been a good cohort of fundraising leads, heads of, and so on. And they've been in a position to just give a bit of background in their experience. And what I've taken away from that is the general consensus is that grant making bodies, whether it's trust and foundations or and direct marketing, has, where it's been invested in pre-pandemic, has really helped to keep things ticking over. And again, it'd be interesting towards the end of this discussion to see what your findings have been. So I'm not dwelling on this doom and gloom, absolutely not, because there are things, techniques, tactics, behaviours, activity that we can do and we can invest in that will really, really help the situation and really help our fundraising activity work hard. So for any of you who have come to a Pebblebeach associated webinar before, you'll know that we have a bit of a tried and tested formula, and this is essentially the approach that we take to all of our activity, but also we sort of bear it in mind whenever we're starting a new program. Audience. So this is really about how to analyse your prospective audience for a campaign and making sure you're selecting the right people to approach. With the proposition, this is where we talk about how to create a strong, tangible, I think tangible is the key element here, fundraising proposition that will maximise your response. Media, again, is looking at offline, online channels, so your campaign reaches the audience in the best way possible. And we all know getting a mix can be really, really effective. Timing creeps in here. It could be the time of day, whether it's, you know, emails going out or other digital activity, from the time of year. It can make a huge difference. We know it can make a huge difference, but it's worth considering. And then creative is where obviously we have words and imagery sort of coming together and using them to deliver something that's compelling and as successful as possible. So I think it's fair to say that individual giving and doing it well is crucial to getting things right. So I am going to take us through to showcase some activity where our clients decided to work their individual giving a bit smarter. Excuse me one sec. If I take us back just to our list, this list, essentially, this tried and tested formula that we apply, it is essentially prioritized. So I have decided to focus on the top 2 elements today that we really think make such a huge impact on individual giving activity. So the first element is audience, which some people will recognize ties very neatly into all your data management and data activity. So Foyle Hospice, we were fortunate enough to deliver essentially what we call an individual's data analysis, and then obviously a subsequent mail file. And this was for Foyle's Lights of Love direct mail appeal, which landed, I think, very early November 21. To give a little bit of context, Foyle's Lights of Love direct mail appeal in its current sort of iteration has been a relatively new product from what I understand for the organisation as such. Essentially, for those of you who maybe don't have a hospice background or aren't aware of what lights can look like, it's really an in-memory product. So that's where supporters are often given an opportunity to engage with an organisation, and it can be through sharing of a heartfelt message in memory of a loved one, and then a donation associated with that if at all possible. So I think, like many organisations, basically they had a really strong gross income from in their 2020 campaign. So there was pressure, it's fair to say there's pressure to deliver, and we wanted to make the product work as hard as possible by focusing an approach to audience selection and data management. Just a really small aside, it's worth mentioning the data that we received. It went back 3 years now. That was based on a sort of internal concern with how data had been managed historically with regard to communications preferences. And again, I'm sure there's a good few of you here who have experienced something similar. But when it comes to this activity, we tend to look at all your donors' giving history. So another consideration as well when it came to this campaign, and again, I'm sure there's many of you here who have had similar experiences within different organizations where maybe the team essentially weren't that experienced when it came to extracting data and managing data. So it was natural that this kind of process would be quite daunting. And I think that's fair. It was at first, it was a little daunting. There wasn't a specified data resource as such. So the team were pulling together, and we appreciated that. And we recognized there maybe needed to be additional support given. And of course, timescales were super tight. But that's not, we can always circumvent such things with flexibility and clever scheduling and all the rest. So basically, when I'm talking about our individuals' data analysis, just to give you, I'll give you some of the features and then I'll give you a little example. So basically the key thing to this, what it means that your charity can do is see the relationships you have with the individuals that support you, and you get a really good understanding of the depth of their relationship, the value of their relationship. We took the data for Foyle, and basically we run it through. We've got a unique database of national charities, and all of the giving history there is anonymized, but we're able to run everything through. And essentially, it's a really unique resource. It is, and that gives us the starting point for the analysis of Foyle's database, essentially. So we're taking everything. We're taking as much as we can in terms of transactional and mailing data ever, And we will then be able to determine a supporter's propensity to give. So this is all based on evidence from other supporters who have given in the same way. So we're looking at recency, so when the donor last gave, frequency, which is obviously the number of gifts given in total, and then value in terms of how much their highest gift was. So essentially, you'll see better maybe in the next table, but this provides like a really clear grouping based on likely return on investment. And then this is also consolidated, this piece of work, with a really clear hierarchy where we would recommend the specific approach to take when it comes to a mailing. So as I say, this is an anonymized example, and it gives you a feel of sort of an output that helps determine, that really helps determine, and also gives you a really good snapshot of your database as to what you can expect from your supporter. So essentially you have different categories that are split out from each other. I'm just going to wiggle, hopefully you can see that. So for example, we would have, this is all based on the charity source codes. So we have regular givers over here on the left hand side. We have in memory somewhere in the middle, general donors. So that's where we don't have a motivation, or we don't understand necessarily a source code, or that the donor has just responded generally as such. And we also have the likes of raffle, event, money box. So essentially, I'll jump back. Essentially each column is mutually exclusive, so you've only got one donor appearing once in each column. As I said, you're prioritized to the left, so essentially your regular givers are topping out at your highest donors, and then your lights, if you do lights activity and so on. So what this, well, basically, so what? Great, that's lovely. That's very, very pretty, very colorful, very fancy. Well, what it does is it shows your donors grouped together, as I said, by return on investment, and it's very handy. I have to say, as a client having undertaken this exercise, I've found this extremely handy to understand. So you can see here for this organization, they've got quite a healthy wee database there, with 23,000 donors in total. In terms of the blue donors, so this line here, these essentially are people who have given a gift of £1,000 or more in their lifetime. So these are your tops. Then obviously it breaks down underneath with green, orange, red, then with lowering ROIs being projected. And then we also have a good look at pulling out your super duper supporters. We call them your engine room. So these essentially are donors who have given 4+ gifts within the last 12 months. And to me, this really does, it creates a really solid mail file, but also this gives you such a good understanding of your supporters. And there's a whole bunch of data that goes behind this. You're obviously just seeing essentially the sort of summary document, but you can see we drill down for every single one of those segments so that you can really see your supporters' behaviour. I hope that makes sense so far. So essentially, as I said, we would share this, and we share with this handy data hierarchy, and we talk through it really carefully with you guys to make sure, you know, things are explained as fully and clearly as possible. And essentially, what are the outcomes? I suppose what it means is that you've got a really systematic approach to data. So forgive me slightly, because in the enthusiasm to share sort of as up-to-date and relevant example as possible, I can't quite share the full findings with you for FOIL. But what I can, because we're actually going to sit down towards the end of March and do a complete response analysis. So what we have identified is that the sort of general situation is that there's a significant portion of income that comes from a tiny, and I mean tiny, group of the mailing file. and it's a puddle of donors. So understanding that and being able to manage them more appropriately going forward is obviously essential. I think as well with some, not with all of our clients who we do this for, I think we have been able to make recommendations that can see up to 50% reduction in terms of mail and postage activity, you know, and that essentially will have with a minimal impact on return on investment, which is sizable. So I think for FOIL, in terms of the systematic approach, it's brought effective segmentation for the first time. Now they're really able to see which segments are responsive, who isn't, who's worth investing in, where your money's going to come from. And it also, I think it's fair to say, we helped really build confidence internally with regard to data management, whether that was like an entry level all the way up. And I think that was really through working very closely, making sure briefings were extremely comprehensive with supporting documentation. And essentially the supported care team who led on this performed exceedingly well. Like they really did a fantastic job. Another output for FOIL is that they encountered really shiny clean data as a result. We had a couple of issues as we sort of went through the process, but some really basic things like how address information is stored, salutations, but we were able to take that data, fix it, give it back so that bulk upload could resolve the whole situation. And we all know that cleaner data equals happier donors, essentially. So, and I think there was an element as well when it comes to the hierarchy that we produce. There's also different ask levels, so we would encourage tailoring, you know, based on giving behaviour that's gone before, appropriate tailoring of ask levels, which again is going to help massively with donor trust. You know, you're asking them for the right level of gift as opposed to something that's completely out of their reach. So yes, I think there was a broad range of positive outcomes that came from undertaking the exercise. I will say that there's a bit of work that comes from this. It's not just as straightforward as pulling the data out. On the client's part, we need you to do things like look at your source codes, look at your anomalies. We ask you to look at the high value and mid value coding just to make sure you're getting it absolutely right and the right donors getting the right ask. But as I said before, as a client, I think investing in this approach means you are taking a forensic look at your data, which you maybe haven't done before, and you're getting to know your supporters in a way that is meaningful. And it also really helps you understand your database's strengths and weaknesses as well, especially going forward. So don't trust me. I have a lovely testimonial from Sheila Duffy, who's the Director of Fundraising and Communications at FOIL. I think for me, a couple of things that jumped out was about the fact that they felt, you know, there was a real improvement in terms of return on investment, especially through some of the data cleansing activity. But I think that the response analysis will also really help with that. The fact that you know, it was a good experience, and I think as well the fact that there was learning being done throughout the whole process. So that covers off the data side of things. Again, just to touch on a few different elements. Essentially, the individual's data analysis is really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what we do and what we can help with. You know, quite often that process is part of a whole appeal. So you've got all the other elements involved, and often that's the better value. But we recognize that clients maybe have other people taking care of different elements, and so investing in data separately is what they want to do. So that's absolutely grand. We do all sorts of different things. We can do audits and reports and different initiatives. A couple of the ones that I think are particularly useful are if you're doing some kind of acquisition activity in the form of a door drop. We will provide what we call our postcode sector analysis, but it's a really good way of looking at your supporters, what's available out there, and making sure you're maximising and tallying it over so that you're investing in the right sectors, essentially. There are some of the higher value activities. So you've got things like your donor value matrix and the donor journeys analysis. That's more for the sort of your top individuals in your database. So with the donor value matrix, it's about looking at the 20% most valuable donors, which I imagine would be pretty interesting. And then the donor journeys analysis, that is looking at the lifetime giving of those individuals, of your top 20%, and essentially, you know, getting a really good picture of who those people are and how they give. Let's see, I think there's a few others. Data anomalies, so that's really looking at where there's maybe chunks of data missing from your database that it's worth flagging and checking and seeing about sorting out. All this other good stuff in terms of deceased and gone away reports. The database ready, that's really where I think could appeal to quite a number. I know we have a really great client at the moment who's going through a situation where they're trying to pull together data from multiple sources. So this is where we would create a single data set, and that could be from paper, PDF, whatever. So yes, particularly useful. So that concludes the data side of things. The next element, just checking time. This one hopefully will be a wee bit snappier. Is looking. Hello.
Sorry to chip in.
You're okay.
I thought I'd just take the opportunity. And somebody's off mute. Do you mind popping your mute on? It's just a bit of rustling. But thank you very much. You've said nothing bad. It's all good. Pencils there.
Is that because my cat appeared? Okay, extern is my next example. Again, another fantastic, well, this is an all Ireland organisation, but fantastic client of ours. Now, I'm going to focus on the proposition side of things because that was a key focus of the project, but it also does touch a bit on timing and creative, but again, I will maintain focus. So essentially, our involvement as Pebblebeach, we worked with Extern on their Safe Havens Christmas campaign. So this featured both a redevelopment of an existing proposition and then some digital activity to support it as well. And I think it is probably fair to say that it showcases our approach to proposition development, where we sort of combine the need with the story. For me, this is what is absolutely crucial about proposition development. You need the need, you need the solution as the organisation, and then you need the story or case study or testimonial, whatever you want to call it, as the sort of glue that really brings the reader, the supporter, together with the beneficiary of the organisation. And it is crucial in terms of generating emotion, because realistically, without emotion being generated, people will not take action, and that's just a fact. So I think what was tricky here was there was maybe difficulty in coming together with fundraising objectives, and there was maybe therefore because of that, it was difficult for the team to have a fundraising proposition as a result. And they also struggled a little bit about storytelling, perhaps just to really sort of showcase and deliver fundraising success. I think as well with Extern, they have capital and revenue needs, which, you know, a lot of organizations face. So the key thing for us is taking a proposition and breaking it down, and the way to make it effective is, and again, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, is applying the SMART objective. So when it comes to being smart with your proposition. So specific, obviously, this is about clearly defining a need with a clearly defined budget. That really, really helps. And then it's about delivering a clearly defined benefit or outcome. So then measurable obviously is an important element. So it's looking at how to quantify success and making sure that outcomes and benefits can be measured and reported back. Achievable is obviously making sure the proposition is going to be realised in, it's going to happen in a short or medium time scale. It's not something that's, you know, an aspiration that's just going to roll on and on and on. We want to show the supporter that this can be seen to be achieved, essentially. Relevant is obviously, when it comes to the proposition, it really helps about relating it to the supporter's interests. So making sure that what's being asked is essentially within that supporter's comfort zone. And then for us, we focused on how to translate that into the operational. So when it came to Extern's Christmas campaign, essentially there were 5 elements that it consisted of. So the campaign itself, sorry, I should have mentioned, launched in the 1st of December. So we had the proposition redevelopment. So that consisted of interviews, messaging, messaging development, and making sure we pulled together a clear report. Then there was the digital elements, which consisted of social campaigns, web campaign content, email campaign content as well, and then elements from that. So the methodology that we took was essentially to start looking at obviously the previous Safe Havens proposition that had been launched, I think it was 6 months previous. So that involved desk research. We also took part in a review meeting, which was essentially pro bono, where we gave some tips and hints as to how we would essentially redevelop. We also undertook interviews with key members of staff. So whether that was, we made sure there was a balance between Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, between the different centres themselves. And we also spent some time with the Director of Services and the Head of Communications. So what was abundantly clear was they had, you know, oodles of really powerful, emotive, inspiring stories to tell. But it was difficult for Extern to share those stories given the need to safeguard their beneficiaries. So what was required was that we got quite creative then with the case study. We made sure there was that we were involving the right person. So it came to light we had a past Extern service user who was a member of staff, but they had first-hand experience of receiving support as a vulnerable teenager. They now a peer mentor, supporting other vulnerable children. She was really, really emotive, really good fit for the appeal. So, and again, a bit of an aside, but most charities, I'm sure, recognise that the strongest advocates are the service users themselves, and they are the greatest experts in their own lives and their, you know, as I say, their experiences. And many of them do appreciate an opportunity to share their experience and to be heard. But then it can be quite difficult for fundraising to source those stories. Often there's a reluctance to expose service users or, you know, focus on privacy. Also, just the basics of people being so busy and feeling like, you know, okay, that's not my job. But as I say, we persisted and we used all of that work in terms of the interviews and so on to develop essentially a mini case for support. I'm going to give you a tiny snippet of the actual proposition that we developed, just to give you a flavour of how we pulled together the problem, solution, and also drilling down to make it tangible. So when it came to the problem, it was, we were asserting that living on the breadline, where a meal is never guaranteed, where drug and alcohol abuse or domestic violence are an everyday reality, and mental health is compromised. This would be unthinkable for most of us, but it's the reality for hundreds of children, and for them, just surviving till tomorrow is a constant challenge. So neat snapshot of problem, as much of the issues as we could condense in something that would be sensible and realistically communicated. In terms of solution, we have that for over 20 years, so we've obviously got the experience. Extern has been a charity providing year-round respite care for these children from 8 to 18 when home life becomes unsafe and life has become unbearable. We've also got a bit of information about the different centres, the different locations. But I think what's really interesting is the real focus went into when a child arrives in only the old clothes on their back, your donation can buy them a new tracksuit and a warm jumper. Your donation can buy a coat and a pair of boots to wear so they can come for a walk with us in the fresh air and begin to relax and talk. Your donation can buy a child a gift to open Christmas morning, perhaps the only gift they'll get this year. So I think that gives you a flavour of how everything's sort of cascaded down. Problem, need, tangible solution for the donor to come on board. And that's just a little snapshot of some of the creative. This is not representative of everything we did. But okay, for extern, what did we achieve? So I think for the fundraising team, they're really delighted that they had this coherent, compelling campaign, a really nice set of key messages. We had, you know, real internal buy-in as well. Once the whole team were able to view the complete works that we'd done, they were very, very happy with it. And again, they had the full suite of digital communications, so everything was looking the same, everything was feeling the same, the language was all mirroring one another. Had a great jump in awareness, so impressions and reactions were both up considerably, and then ultimately their track donations as well were up, which was significant in itself at 884%. But as I say, I think a big part of the success for these guys was about creating a process, creating a system of how to develop a proposition effectively, gather stories, breaking down barriers, and bringing the whole team together to take pride in an effective fundraising campaign. So again, don't believe me. It was an absolute pleasure to work, I have to say, with both Foyle and Extern, great charities, great people. I think what was nice for these guys was about the design and copy and the success there. So again, just to round off really and tell you a little bit more about what we can do proposition wise. We can obviously create a proposition from scratch. We can redevelop one as we did with Extern. We can look at, you know, the proposition when it comes as part of a full warm appeal, and what you get with that is a high value version, your thank you letters, email copy as well for both appeals and reminders. We can also do sort of, I suppose, a more reduced version where you can have a warm pack, but we will only give you first copy and you can do with it what you will. And then when it comes to creative, well, we can do it all. So everything from raffle, gifts and wills, welcome brochures. These are a few of my favorite from when I was client side. But yes, no, I'm not going to labor this one. We do a lot of different activities, and I have great experience in doing them as well. So yes, this is just a wee sort of summary, which might be helpful. And that is me for now. We do have another webinar coming up towards the end of the month. You're very welcome to come along. But yes, Amy, do we have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Oh my goodness.
It must mean you've been very thorough. So unless anybody has one now that they want to put in. Going once.
An observation, maybe, just from me. I mean,
Go for it, Paul.
I've not really worked in individual giving in the past, so I'm probably not the best person to speak. on it, but just strikes me as getting that balance between structure and story. So important. I mean, if you've only got one of them, you're selling yourself short. You need them both in order to get the most out of it. So no, it's really interesting to see. And that was it 35% reduction in direct debits.
I know,
over
it
here.
breaks my heart.
Crazy. So
I think what all of that research shows, and maybe I didn't clarify it, but that we are all going to have to work harder. We are going to have to work smarter for that pound, for that fiver, whatever it is. And that's why doing these, like, they're not these aren't massive undertakings. I appreciate it. Sometimes these things are extra work and so on, but it's worth doing because you really are maximizing your investment. I'm sure there's lots of other examples we could provide, but for me, those were the two, especially being Northern Ireland, and because audience is so crucial and proposition so crucial. Yeah.
One of the things too, I think is probably worth adding is to be mindful of everything else that's going on in the world. So, you know, where COVID was the focus for the past however many years, we now have a situation where there's a refugee crisis, you know, in Europe, and people are starting to say, how can I help? How can I give my money? And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't also go out and ask for money, but what it does mean is you just need to be cognizant of the fact that people might have their priorities lying elsewhere. And it's about really telling that storytelling element is like, why do you need the money right now? Why do you need that money? Not in lieu of anybody else, but why is it important that you give at this point in time for this particular cause?
And I think that really underlines the importance of timing as well, because, you know, as you say, you know, being cognizant of what else is going on out there, you know, and not landing whenever, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's going to be stories that break, or, you know, things that happen that can't be avoided, but where possible. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole cost of living situation, that's, you know, that wasn't factored in obviously to any of this research. Oil prices, you know, it's dire reading, but that's where I think it's the whole thing about acting smarter, isn't it? It's about being clever about what you're going to do where possible.
That's a good point too about timing, Elley, because I don't know if anybody else has done this, but because I was thinking about it today, but who's booked up all their holiday for this year? Because we can actually go somewhere. You know, there's that side to it too. So it's people are a little bit more free, but then there's the energy crisis, and then it's just being mindful of all of these things. But you can still ask for money. It's okay.
You can do it clever. That's it. You can. There's techniques. There's lots of different things, and like that is definitely tip of the iceberg. There's loads of stuff that can be done where you're just getting that money to work harder. Your investment. How are we all doing? Please tell me I haven't depressed you.
I think it's all good. No, really, no questions, none, nothing.
I'll take that.
I got a thumbs up. Oh, that's so funny.
Thank you so much for coming, though, folks. I really do appreciate it, and yeah, keep doing your amazing work as well. These are awesome.
The thing for me, Elley, is that, you know, there's always going to be connection to cause, and you know, we just have to keep asking, because you ask the right time with the right person, you're going to get the right answer.
Yeah.
So focus on that. You've still got an audience. There will always be an audience. It might not be the right time for the audience, but no.
I'm going to say something in honor of Ash, who can't be here, because he's always wanted to talk about opening doors. So his big thing is, you know, you just got to make sure you keep opening those doors, and the right person will go through the right door at the right time. So yes, open doors, keep asking. All done.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. Personally, thank you. I've learned a bit more today. I'll step away from community and events at some point in time. And we have also a feedback form. I'll try and put the link in the chat, and maybe we'll pop it in an email after as well. Let us know how you got on today. As you know, we've got a funder for this, and we want to make sure that we're getting some good data back for them. So just, it'll be a 2-minute survey, tick some boxes for us. Let us help shape what other things we've got coming on. And yeah, just appreciate you giving the time out to come and listen today.